Greetings, one and all. It's me, Robert Phoenix, your Astro Weatherman, and I am reporting to you live from the Hill Country in Texas. Let me take these earbuds out, adjust the screen. There we go. Some of you are asking what the thumbnail in the background is for today. I was looking for something from Utah, and this is what I got. I'm not even sure if it's a real picture or if it's an illustration, but I thought it was kind of cool. So that's what we got. And what we got is the first day of Leo in August. We've already had Leo first day on the 23rd. 23rd? 23rd. But this is the first day of Leo in the month of August, August 1st. And we are going to get into the weather and more. DJ MC batting leadoff once again. Mary Lee checking in from muggy Nashville. Melissa Stanton. Howdy. Janice Phillips got to run out to the barn, do goat things. Hub talked me into having wine and dinner with him last night, so I broke my fast meal sluggish. Yeah, that'll, it is the backlash of a Bacchanalian lifestyle, but sometimes it's not a bad thing to do. Let's see. Yes, you only have 129. Bonjour, Maria. Et al. Yes, indeed. Christina Jerzyk. What's happened, Christina? Good to see you. Mia. Greetings to you, Mia. Susie G, the Queen of Hearts in the house. Joe Litke. I'm going to put that right up there, Joe. Thank you very much. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell to be aware of the Astro Weather. Thank you, Joe. Sue Leonard. Hi, Sue. Brandy Herrera. Brandy, how's it going? I hope you're still on four wheels and moving forward. Liddy Lou checking in from the upper part of Texas. Hi, Liddy Lou. Green-eyed Crow. Hey, Seeger, good to have pint of cold brew coffee and on a garden bench avoiding machete in Richmond. Oh, man. Wow. I think it's really fast. I guess they've charged that guy with murder now. I think the first few days we're very concerned about his mental health. We're going to check into his mental health. Meanwhile, whatever happened in that dance center and the stabbings that went on, that was kind of a tertiary story. If you don't know what Sigurd is talking about, there were a set of stabbings in England a few days ago at a dance center where they were doing some kind of Taylor Swift thing. That was their first mistake. And a 17-year-old Rwandan who supposedly had been born in England decided to go in there and play samurai. Right. So the locals were decidedly upset over the whole thing. And who can blame them? And of course, the British press immediately labeled them as far right, and we're just slagging them with the hateful and the terrorist and the far right. No, they're not far right. They're just fucking pissed off because their government created that situation and their government has refused to do anything about it when other situations like this have come up. So anytime anybody expresses any type of anger or rage around some form of social injustice, now they're far right. Unless, of course, they look differently. Let's see. Glemma Spank in the house. There he is, T. Jordan. What's going on, Thomas? Scrubbies. Driving home from Missy's walk in the park. Nice. There he is. There's my man Ryan, the introspective woodworker. What's going on, brother? Moira from NYC. She's the lovely and talented one, saving Austin 1/2 at a time. Yes, we will have a members only event on Saturday. And I'm going to be posting today with some new, fresh content on locals. Look forward to that. Nora Rashid, the queen of speed, she is here with the pedal to the metal. Nicholas Grimm, best wishes back. Monica Farrow, the sun blesses the biospiritually homogeneous. Oh my God. Kelly B, what's shaking? SP Dimples from Europa. We got Warlanda in for a little cup of coffee. And then she's off to an appointment. Julie E. Payne, a cold, dark night in New Zealand. It was a cold, dark night in New Zealand. Let's see. What else we have here? Road Trip 1981. What's going on, darling? There's my man, Steve. It is Thursday. Thor at the door. Brandon Lee, Belton, South Carolina, checking in. August is here to bring the bringing of the harvest. Autumn's coming. Yes, we are beginning. What kind of harvest are we talking about? Are we going to be talking about a war harvest? I'm going to be talking a little bit about that today. Let's see. Where do I send the New Zealand sunrise pic? Let's see. Where can you send one? That's a good question. I'll put my email address in the comments. And you can send it there, Julia. How about that? Done. Yes, you can buy me a coffee right there. Link is on the show notes. And to everyone who has bought me a cup of coffee, I raise my cup to you. Thank you. There's nothing in there, or else I would have drank out of it. Shirley Losciavo, Maryland in the house. I'd like to see Robert get into Nephilim Death Squad with Toplo Blobsta and David Lee Corbo. I don't have to talk about astrology. I can talk about just about anything. By the way, I did a really great 2-hour show with Danny yesterday, and that'll be coming out soon on Danny's channel. Really, really good talk. Masio Gabbert, let me take you to the bridge. That's right. Take you to the bridge, Masio. Take you to the bridge. We do have 15 minutes of flame coming up today, and I'm going to be talking about the Trump all-in strategy and other things. We'll also be talking about the major militarization campaign happening in Israel. Bill Brockman says, happy August, my month. Right on, Bill. My birthday girl woke me up first thing, ready to party. Party like it's 1999. Damn good sound. Alan Parsons would be proud. Very underrated, that Alan Parsons. Highly underrated. Yes, please, if you have not signed up for our events in October, I urge you to do so. I have kept the price for this year's event at a reasonable rate. I'll be there. Darlena will be there. Mario for symbolic studies. DJ Pebbles will be spinning on Saturday night. You're going to get some really good hill country cooking all 3 days. Really healthy organic snacks, water, you name it. We take care of you. It is a really good time. And so that's the 4th through the 6th here in the hill country. If you're interested, go to the Inn of the Hills. You can call them. You have to go there. Inn of the Hills, reserve a room, and the rates are reasonable. It's a really nice place, and you can even cancel your room. They're not going to charge you for it. But hopefully you don't cancel and you join us in October. It's going to be a great time. Okay, here we go. Lady Lou's going to the hospital for back injections at noon. All right, Lady Lou, we'll keep you in our thoughts. And we hope those injections do what they're supposed to do. Barbara Boots is here. She doesn't have to go somewhere. Well, welcome. Marie MacArthur. Hi there. What's going on, Marie? Lewis Walton, real estate market update. Yes, tomorrow we will have Russ Winter on Russ is back. And we'll have no doubt a timely conversation about what's happening in Israel, which is really heating up. Okay, I'm going to try this again. Is it Sorsh? My McMahon. Did I get that right? Sorsh. Did I get that right? I hope I did. Welcome back. There she is, Queen Lisa, Florida checking in. The fantastic one, CC Jones. She's here. Okay, here we go. This is a big update. Today, the NRA settlement goes into full effect where buyer may end up paying their agents directly when buying a home instead of commission for buyer paid by seller. Wow. That's a huge shift, isn't it? I wonder if you can see that in the astrology. We'll check that out. Shelly Myers here. Greetings, Shelly. The machete thing is a crazy wave at the moment. That's just only the front page story because of kids. Yeah, no doubt. Kids sell papers. Kids sell papers and they move legislation. Children are the most exploitable thing in our society around the world, globally, right? That's what they are. Children are just, they're exploitable. They're always using kids to move an agenda. And it's really cheap. Really cheap. Lowest common denominator shit. Jen Adams from Brooklyn. Love Brooklyn. Meow Meow's here. Meow Meow. Meow Meow. Kelly finally caught 15 minutes last night. More woohoo. Yeah, hey. Happy birthday, Nipper. Oh, Nipper from RCA. Is it Nipper's birthday? Nipper the dog from RCA? How about that? Did not know that. Let's see. Anna Lisiak Grzinski from Poland. We got Poland in the house. Look at that. Awesome. My ex-wife's father is Polish. So my son has Polish blood running through him. PMSO, Janine. What's going on, Janine? Looking forward to seeing you in October. Moonsprout is here. Yeah, 1st of August. Yes, that's right, Roger. Good, I got it right. How about that? Kelly B will be listening, but not may be in chat much. All good, Kelly. Carolyn Moore leaking somewhat dire. Not saying, do you concur? Well, so one of the things that Danny and I get into is like, so the timeline has shifted, and now there is a flex and a control for the new timeline. So I hope that helps you understand your comment a little bit more in where I'm at with Zerlath, the immortal Curtis Moonflower. One of these days, I'd like to hang out with Curtis Moonflower and just play obscure records from the 1970s. That would be a cool thing. Catherine Rosen. What's going on, CR? Good to see you. Mary Gruther. Sandra Jack Shaw. Checking in. Boy, we got a full house today. Russ is great, but it's proper news bait. I have to listen to Kitaro afterwards. I actually saw Kitaro one time. I met Kitaro in San Jose. He was a very nice man. Silk Road is still a beautiful record. I still like Silk Road. Ruth McVitie, Ireland, checking in. I have some Irish blood in me, Ruth. Let's see. Patty Kincaid. Greetings. All right, I think we're all up to speed here. Let's get into it. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you all. I'm working on my taxing. I'm working on my taxing. So when I run for public office, I'll sound more like a Texan this time. Now I'm starting to sound like Jason. Now I'm starting to sound a little like our Tex. No, I don't want to sound like that. Here we go. Zoom in. All right, we're still in the static immutability. We've got Mercury at 3 Virgo, getting closer and closer and closer to squaring that. Mars in Gemini is a wrecking ball, right? Especially as it gets closer and closer to Jupiter. As I've mentioned before, Mars in Gemini is one of the most restless Mars aspects in the zodiac. And one of the examples I use, which is a somewhat obscure example, but nonetheless fitting. There was a coach who used to coach for the Golden State Warriors named Don Nelson. And Don Nelson was, if I'm not mistaken, a Cancer. I believe he was born either on the same day or the day before Billy Martin, the manager of the Mets, or I'm sorry, the A's, Yankees, all these other teams. But Nelly had Mars and Gemini. And if you look at his path, his resume as a coach, it is peripatetic. It is all over the place. He's a really good coach. He starts off in Milwaukee, makes them really good. They don't go to the playoffs. They get close. He winds up going to Oakland, where he gets a small share of the Warriors with his buddies from Milwaukee who buy the team. And he does really, really well in Oakland. And one of the things that he becomes a pioneer of is what they call small ball. And that's when he would have like 4 guys in the court who were like 6'5" and under, and he may have a center that might be 6'7" or 6'8". And what he would do is he would create a complete mismatch on the other team because his team was faster, quicker, and it drove other teams crazy. So Nelly does this small ball thing, but he's always blowing up his teams, right? He's always, trying to reconfigure things. He's a tinkerer. And he winds up trading Mitch Richmond, who was part of Run TMC, for this lazy asshole Billy Owens, who on paper looks really good, but on the court, not very motivated, right? So this is his thing, right? And then Nelly would also get fired, but he would keep the money from the job. He'd have like maybe 2, sometimes even 3 years left on his contract. He'd keep that money, and then eventually he'd go work with another team. But it's that Mars and Gemini which kept him from just staying the course. I mean, there was brilliance there, right? There was brilliance. Like, okay, you're big, we'll go small, right? That's Gemini. Gemini kind of flips things around. And his strategy for that is now very popular in the NBA. So he's a bit ahead of his time. But it was, when I looked at his chart, and I saw they did that Mars and Gemini. Well, that makes total sense. He's like a basketball gypsy. And he's also a mad tinkerer. I guess he lives in Hawaii now and grows pot and plays poker and gets high with Willie Nelson. That's his life. Anyway, Mars is going to get closer and closer to Jupiter, and Mercury's lining up here to come into that hard angle square with Mars and Jupiter. To me, this is the vibe here is not good. It's just not good. Um, we have Jupiter squaring off against Saturn, and Saturn's retrograding. Mars is going to come in there, and it's going to slam Saturn. Like this is all within the next 2 weeks. We're talking 2 weeks, and I'll actually get into this a bit more in depth on locals on Saturday. But this is a shitty situation, I have to say. Now, the good thing is that it's mutable, so like it's changeable and fluid, and things can happen fast, which is also bad, right? And we're watching reports that the U.S. fleet is headed to the Middle East. I mean, it just really feels like the clock is ticking. It's like a ticking time bomb. And remember, Uranus is still on Israel's sun and is still squaring Israel's Mars. So it has not gone away, right? That intense, explosive energy is still very much in the air. And we are in a very, and I'll talk more about this on 15, but we're in a situation in this country where there's no discernible leadership. I mean, you theoretically have a president who is still president nominally, and then you have this other person who's running around campaigning. So if I were a foreign power, whether it's China or Russia or Israel, man, I would strike and I would strike fast because this is this an incredibly vulnerable time. It's an incredibly vulnerable time. So, I'm not sure what to do about that, right? Like, there's nothing that I can personally do about what is likely going to go down in the Middle East. And what's interesting is that we have school coming back up here. I believe college classes will resume in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks puts this Mercury at 17 Virgo, which puts it into an even tighter square with Jupiter and puts it into an exact opposition with Saturn. All right, so I predict that we're going to have more unrest on campuses as they open back up. We had a little summer vacation, and the Neiman Marxists have to go off and have their summer vacation somewhere, right? Go to a Neiman Marxist camp. But I can see this happening in 2 weeks, and now we have greater conflagration here on the ground. Now that's going to be a very interesting situation because I guarantee you it's going to happen. Like nothing has changed. If anything, Israel has turned up the volume in their efforts to eradicate every single last Palestinian from the area, which is really what they're doing. So do you think it's just going to be business as usual on college campuses? Now, this is going to be a huge test for Harris and how she responds to this. Because theoretically, the neoliberal left have been much more in favor of supporting the Palestinian side of this conflict. And Harris is going to have a real, we know where Trump is. We know where Trump is. We know where Trump stands. Like he's already doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down. Right. But this is a minefield for Harris that's coming up. And how she navigates these upcoming protests on the college campuses is going to be very interesting. I think it's probably above her pay grade. If she says we stand with Israel, we support Israel, but we keep the Palestinian people in our hearts and minds, that's not going to cut it. That is not going to cut it, especially for the young vote that she's trying to court. They will freeze her out. That doesn't mean they're going to go over to Trump. They just won't vote, or maybe they'll go to Kennedy. Although Kennedy's position on Israel and Palestine is as bad as Trump's, and Harris will change her position for anything. But will she come out and publicly defend what's happening? Because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Now, if they shift to a conflict with Iran, then it's a different discussion, right? So she can maneuver around the Palestinian and Gaza issue. And now she's a wartime president, or at least a wartime vice president. But still, that's going to be tough sledding, I think, for her. It will be. I mean, how does she and again, where is Biden? Right? There is no Biden. So that's on the big picture. This is the volatility of the mutability. And it's only going to get worse. It's going to get exacerbated even more. Now, again, we look at how does this affect us in our own personal lives? Well, we go back to yesterday and we return to this idea that Mercury and Virgo wants to solve issues, wants to solve problems. And it's not necessarily bad with a square with Mars, right? Mercury square Mars is a laser beam. Not everybody's ready for a laser beam. So if you're going to get out your laser beam, you better make sure that you need to use it. Right? And we're not even at peak Mercury Mars square yet. I just feel like tempers are going to run very hot, very high over the next 6 days easily. Like 3 coming in and 3 coming out, right? So the next week, and it's going to the temperature is going to incrementally rise. And the Mercury Mars square is taking something minuscule and making something much bigger out of it. It reminds me of the Chappelle videos when keeping it real goes wrong. If you're going to keep it real, you better be really certain how real you want to keep it and be ready to deal with the consequences. Mercury Mars square, I am not opposed to using language like a laser beam. It's okay. Right? We don't always have to speak in soft and dulcet, mellifluous tones. But again, my caveat is always if you're going to use the laser beam, ask the person first. Like if you say, "Excuse me, would you mind if I took out my laser beam here and responded to what you just had to say?" They're like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" They'll just say, "Hey, you want some feedback? Would you like some feedback?" "Yeah, sure." Now you got the laser beam. But this is critical, right? I mean, I don't necessarily think it's bad, right? Sometimes people need to hear things in a way that cuts through the bullshit and through the fog. But if you're going to do that, you got to be real precise with your language and real clear about what your intent is. And again, as always, I believe you need permission. If you don't have permission, it will fall on deaf ears. And even worse, with this energy, you will have a major argument and conflagration on your hands. Now, what happens if somebody turns the laser beam back on you? Oh, well, that's an interesting question. Now, hopefully, they'll ask you the same thing that I just asked. But if they don't, The rejoinder is, well, first of all, I never asked for what for your opinion. Secondly, you never asked me if I wanted to hear your opinion or your thoughts on the situation. And just based on that alone, that completely invalidates everything you just said to me. So if you want to have a different kind of conversation, let's hit the rewind switch. And why don't you ask me if I want to hear what you have to say? And at that point, if they say, okay, I apologize. Let's try it again. Do you want to hear what I have to say? And you can say yes. You can say no. You can say, no, I really don't want to hear what you have to say, but thank you for asking. And you can walk away. Right. Or you say, yeah, okay, I'm open. What do you have to say? Because sometimes people can give us insight into ourselves that we don't always want to see or hear or look at. It's like a bit of a reality check. It's not always bad, but they have to come correct. And if they don't come correct, then you have to set them straight. That is one of the most critical parts of communicating. It's called contract and agreement. If there's no contract and agreement between you and another person, you will not have an equal and fair exchange. And all it takes is for the other person to consent and say yes or no. And no is a legitimate response. Completely legitimate. Venus creeping up, squaring off against Uranus. Okay, I've been following. I follow Naomi Wolf on Twitter, and she is in meltdown mode, man. She has become like the good. I'll talk about this more over on 15. She's become like the good little school marm from the left, telling Republicans or truthers or patriots or MAGA people or red pillars. She's telling them how to interact, right? How to interact or how Trump needs to interact. She's doing all of this like truth splaining, and people are getting really fucking uptight with her. They're getting upset. Like, you don't really get it, do you? It's fascinating to watch. And the reason I'm bringing it up is it's right in that Venus Uranus square, right? Like she's trying to make this bridge, but every time she makes the bridge, she just lays more dynamite under the bridge and blows it up again. And then maybe sometime during the night, like all these people they're saying, oh, well, you were interesting for a while. Right? She's become this limited hang. This is what I'm talking about with the Venus Uranus square. Like she's tone deaf. She can't hear it. I don't know if she has the G marker or doesn't have it or what. She can't hear it. And this is what happens with the Venus Uranus square. And especially in fixed sign. Like, okay, we're gonna fix this. We're gonna fix this. You got to do this. You got to do this. It's like, no, we don't do a fucking thing. And by the way, you're really way off the target. You're way off. So she is literally everything that she was an interesting person, that she had found this middle ground between being a social liberal and having some body freedom issue choices around COVID. She did a lot of good work on COVID. It was like, oh yeah, you're standing up for the things that other free thinking people stand up for. You're not just part of the herd. Well, good for you. Good for you. We'll support you. We'll follow you. And now all of a sudden, all that's just being blown up, right? That's the Venus Uranus square. Like goodwill is just being destroyed. And that's really kind of what this thing is about. And with Venus and Leo, it's like she's, and again, she's a Scorpio, so she's fixed sign, but Venus and Leo is proud. It's proud. Like it had like on a relational level, it knows theoretically how to relate, right? It is the royal eye. And then squaring Uranus and Taurus it doesn't work. And it feels like there's a lot of this even going on with Harris, where she comes out and she brings out Megan the Stallion, right? And I've got receipts on you know the black community who is disgusted with her for pandering. Like, she's pandering. That's your Venus Uranus square. Venus in Leo wants to be popular. It wants everybody to love it, right? Love me, love me, love me, love me, love me. And will in this situation will go to any lengths in order to get that back. Right? That's the Venus Uranus square. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Now, the good side or the upside of the Venus Uranus square is that if you do deal with somebody that's outside of your normal circle, it can be kind of interesting. It can force you to rethink some of your limitations or prejudices or whatever, right? Kind of breaks those. So that's the positive side. The negative side is Venus and Leo locked into ego, love me, love me, love me, and then blowing up the stage behind you as you walk off of it, right? So the volatility, there's a high degree of volatility. Now the moon has moved into Cancer, and we're coming into a balsamic phase, which is actually pretty good for the weekend. If there was a good weekend to retreat, this would be the weekend. And when we get that moon in the balsamic position, especially in Cancer, it can be quite emotional and quite weepy. As we watch Rome burn around us, there's a much higher degree of sentimentality in looking back on the way things were. Somebody in chat said, "Can we just beam back to 1999?" There's a lot of that going on, right? There's a lot of that in the air. People are not happy with this time that we're in. And at the same time, it's kind of like, here we are. We're going to have to go through it. And the quality of our journey will be determined by what's in our hearts, by our mindset, and by the choices that we make. That's how it'll go down. And if the quality in your heart is good, you have the right mindset, and the majority of your choices are good choices, you'll be in a good place. And if you don't or not, you won't be. And sometimes that's tricky, because sometimes what you have to do may not include other people. You may have to go your own way. And that's a lot of this kind of balsamic Cancerian moon phase. So I believe that the emotions are going to be running quite high starting tomorrow and going through the weekend. And it is a good time to retreat. The Mercury moon sextile, I think, is really good right here for anything that has to do with like arts and crafts and precision work. So if you're a crafty person, it's a really good time to just focus and get things done. If you are engaged in any kind of like canning, prepping, really good time to do that as well. We're talking about today, tomorrow, mostly today, all the way through today. But as we move into that balsamic moon, closer to the weekend, it's there's definitely a sense of loss and sadness in the air around the way things were and used to be, and probably never ever. And I think we all know on a certain level that they're never coming back. But what's really interesting is that a lot of the Gen Z kids are not sampling new media. They're not sampling new movies. They're not sampling new music. The stats are in, and Gen Z is going back into the 70s and the 80s. And that's what they're listening to, and that's what they're watching. So it's kind of interesting that YouTube has become like this time machine, and it's implanting the past into the present, through this sort of auditory and visual transmission. I think it's fascinating. So even though we won't go back to that time, there is a generation that's taking that in. And we may see like new forms of cinema or music or art that would actually reflect that, but in a new way, not in a kind of regurgitated way. Mars is still trining Pluto, and the multitask and the inherent value, proposition value, the multitask, I think is still quite good. If you keep your head down and try to stay out of the crossfire, which is going on, you get a lot done. Get a lot done, and things that you get done are meaningful, right? Pluto's transformational. Mars in Gemini tends to be very skittish and moves around a lot. But if it locks into Pluto, you can make some meaningful change happen. So anyway, there's your astro weather for the day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's bring up the banner, the Bruce banner. Okay. So today's True Hemp Science star of the day is my dad. Now, he went by the name of Sonny Boy when he was a kid. And, he's a Leo. How about that? He's a Leo, and they called him Sonny Boy. How appropriate is that? Before I get into Sonny Boy's chart here, please support our sponsor, True Hemp Science, truehempscience.com. It is time for me to take my morning dose of Hey 19. Look at the golden amber of the terpenes. Those terpenes, strongly medicinal. You know it's good when it's strongly medicinal. Anyway, if you go to truehempscience.com and spend $100 or more, type in 15MINS, 15MINS, and you will get a free goodie bag. Pretty sure you're going to get a Moonlight Gummy. It's worth it. The Moonlight Gummy alone is worth it. Chris over at True Hemp Science also has sleep gummies as well. Help you kind of nod off a little bit there at night, and a whole variety of CBD, oil-based, alcohol-based, spagyrics, you name it, he's got it. $150 more, get you free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. TrueHempScience.com. All right, let's get into Sonny Boy's chart. Born August 1st, 1935, Shreveport, Louisiana, at 10:10 a.m. Libra rising and Venus in Libra on the ascendant. So he was a handsome man, right? He was a handsome dude, and he had this Mars and Scorpio secret weapon. Like, he was the cat's meow for women, even when he was older. I couldn't believe it. Like, women were always coming on to this guy, right? Mars and Scorpio. Jupiter in the second house. Let me tell you about his Jupiter. He did not have he dropped out of high school to join the Army when he was a junior. And he eventually did 3 stints in the Army. Well, the first stint didn't go so well, so he re-enlisted, and then he did 2 more terms after that. So eventually he wound up getting his GED many years later. And he never really made more than $45,000 a year. Maybe 50 at the most. But he has Jupiter in the second house, and the guy had a freaking, 28-foot sailboat, a powerboat, not at the same time. 28-foot sailboat, powerboat, Mercedes, Cadillac, BMW motorcycle, Honda Goldwing. Like, he had more toys than just about anybody else I've ever met. And he was, as a Leo, kind of the ultimate hobbyist. And you can sort of see that here with Saturn down in the fifth house. So he had a lot of hobbies like photography. He was a jeweler, right? So he made these rings, right? So, but he always had the equipment in order to do all these things. Now, it helped that my mother was also a breadwinner. She made more than he did, but he worked his ass off, mostly, you know, sort of, he was a teamster, warehouseman. That went away and eventually became a truck driver for a produce company, would drop stuff off at produce and meat company, drop it off at like restaurants, like nothing special. Like his career was nothing special. But he had all these toys, right? How did he do it? Well, Uranus over there in the eighth house, other people's money. It's called buying on credit, right? So they always had really good credit, so they could buy things on credit, and that's how, in many ways, he was able to afford all the things that Jupiter would bring him in the second house. Now, what's really interesting is that he was probably one of the most astute psychologically astute people I've ever met. And when you see his chart, he's got that Mercury Pluto conjunction in Cancer. Like he could size somebody up right away. He knew exactly like where the weak spot in any situation was. Right? He was that precise. That cutting in a lot of ways. He was also a tremendous listener with Mercury and Cancer. And the education thing is fascinating. Chiron and Gemini, ninth house, did not go to college. Kind of an autodidact. He read Shakespeare. He was a huge fan of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I mean, he was a voracious reader. And eventually he would get into later in life taking these like battery tests to see what his like education level was. Where he was really keen on proving to himself that he was intelligent, smart, even though he never went to college. So he tested out as a somebody with a postgraduate degree, right? And he was amazing. Like he could build anything. I mean, he was just an incredible craftsman. He could tear an engine apart. He could landscape a yard. He had all these tremendous talents. And the greatest frustration for him was in his professional life. And it was hard to kind of watch him sort of flail a bit in that world. You know, when you see somebody, and I know that everybody kind of has a similar story with somebody they know is just insanely talented and they never really rise to the level of their talent. And it can be just so incredibly frustrating to uh, watch that happen in their lives. Um, and there was even a period of my life where I questioned my own ambition and if I was somehow subconsciously sabotaging myself so that I wouldn't outshine my father, right? Like I had these thoughts in my head sometimes, and I had to work through a lot of those things. Now, one of the interesting things was that he took one of these uh, tests about what his vocation could be, and it was very, very specific. He did it through the University of California, Berkeley, and the test results came back. It said that he should be an orthoprosthesist, meaning that he should be somebody who makes artificial limbs for people. That's how specific this was. And the only place that you could learn that at that time was a college in Seattle. So we would have had to uproot our lives and go to Seattle. So I'm looking like, well, where is that in his chart? I think it's somewhere in Saturn, right? Saturn in Pisces, kind of leaning into that sixth house service. Um, and he's got that Mars trine to Saturn. Jupiter trying to Saturn. So if he kind of leaned to that, I think he could have done something like that. I don't think it's out of the question. Um, he has this mystic rectangle, and he always seemed to land on his feet, which is very much like a mystic rectangle. In fact, he told me this one story. This is a mystic rectangle story. When he was young, he used to get into a lot of fights. You've got Mars squaring his sun, right? Like that's a it's potentially a very violent person, right? So he's getting he was very angry when he was young. Again, Saturn the father, difficult placement. His mother got divorced from my paternal grandfather when he was quite young, and his father was, not a very strong man. Right, wasn't a very strong man, and he wound up becoming kind of a hardcore alcoholic and died in a wreck. Right, so this is what my father had to deal with. Not a very strong father figure in his life. Look at the T square, and in fact, he was actually raised more by his great grandfather. So he had a lot of anger, and back in the 50s, young men used to fight. Right, that's what they did. The whole gang thing and like those portrayals were not untrue. So one night he was in a fight in San Francisco and he beat a guy up really bad, really, really bad. And they threw him in jail and they had night court back then. And a female judge, which was very rare at the time, he told me this story. A female judge got his case and she questioned him and talked to him. And I think she saw something in my father. Maybe it was that Mars and Scorpio, but she saw something in my father and basically flipped his life. Right. Like after that moment was a pivotal moment for him. And it became this, kind of ongoing um, mystic rectangle where things could fall apart, but then they would sort of come back together again and he would land on his feet. Super interesting dynamic in his life. Never really landing on his feet so he can spring to the next level. Right. But he always managed to land on his feet. Uh, and I think he was incredibly hard on himself. He has that moon in Virgo. My mother had the moon in Virgo, but she had it in the full moon position. He has it almost in the like a new moon position, right? So they're dueling moons, full moon, new moon. I was in this Virgo moon vice from both parents. Like, get me out of here. And it's opposite Saturn. And again, I have said this on numerous occasions. In most cases, when you see moon Saturn opposition, there's divorce. That's exactly what happened. And this is back in the 50s, right? 40s. 40s. My mother gets a divorce in the 40s. Like, who does that? Not pretty rare. Pretty rare. So, I mean, he was a Leo, right? He was a total Leo. And then he gets into this Mars, Sun Mars square. And one time he looked at me, dead serious. And he says, if you strike the king, you have to kill the king. I'm like, what the fuck? Why did you have to go there? Right? Like, okay, all right, I get it. Right? You're telling me that if anything comes between us, that I better be prepared to put you 6 feet under. But when he said it, it's like, oh, okay, I got that. I definitely got that. He also told me that if I ever smoke, he'd twist my arms off. I'd listen to that. That was something I paid attention to. And he gave me a pretty interesting life lesson too. And it has to do with Venus. And he said to me, Venus and Libra, he said, don't ever gossip about people. Don't ever talk about people behind their backs. And You know, every now and then you have to relearn the lesson, but I really took that to heart. Right? Extremely emotional guy, tons of water, um, not a lot of air, you know? Oh, that's Venus and Virgo, isn't it? Oh, yeah, Venus and Virgo. I'm just looking at sorry. That's but still, it's not quite on the ascendant. But he again, the advice still applies. He just doesn't have a lot of air in his chart. So he had no when you don't have a lot of air in your chart, you don't have a lot of objectivity. That's how it works. He just didn't have a lot of objectivity. And I always thought, well, how did he and my mother get together? Well, she's got a shit ton of planets in his seventh house, right? Like Venus, Saturn, Mercury, like they're all in his seventh house. So, of course, it makes sense. All right. Wherever you are, little sunny boy, I hope you're tripping the light fantastic. That'll do it for today. Thank you for being here. We're headed over to 15 minutes of flame. And come join us. We're going to get down into the gritty, the real gritty. And we'll talk about how Trump can win the election. Ain't pretty, it's gritty. Treat each other well. Remember that. You have everything you need inside of you. And God bless each and every one of you. Have a great day.